The world went to hell on a Tuesday, which Marcus Webb always thought was pretty damn fitting since Tuesdays had always sucked anyway. Nobody saw it coming, not really. Sure, there'd been warnings on the news about some virus outbreak in the coastal cities, but folks in Miller's Crossing figured they were far enough inland that the chaos wouldn't reach their little slice of nowhere. They were dead wrong, and now a whole lot of them were just plain dead. Marcus crouched behind the overturned pickup truck, his breath coming in short bursts as he checked the magazine in his rifle. 12 rounds left. Not nearly enough for the crowd of rotting corpses shuffling down Main Street, their moans creating a symphony of hunger that made his skin crawl. The undead had rolled into town like a plague of locusts 3 days ago, and what had been a community of 5,000 living souls was now maybe a couple hundred scattered survivors, if that. Most folks hadn't made it past the first night. They'd been too slow, too trusting, too convinced that their neighbors wouldn't actually try to tear their throats out just because they'd caught some bug. "Yo, Marcus, you seeing this?" The voice crackled through his radio, belonging to Jackson Reynolds, who was posted up in the hardware store across the street. "That's gotta be at least 100 of those things, maybe more. We can't hold this position much longer, man." Marcus pressed the talk button, keeping his voice low even though he knew the zombies didn't hunt by sound alone. "I know, Jack. Where's the rest of the crew?" Static filled the air for a moment before Jackson responded. "Tommy's on the roof of the diner with the hunting rifle. Says he's got maybe 20 shots. Brianna and Kyle are fortifying the community center with whatever they can find. That's our fallback point if this street goes to hell." Marcus peered around the truck's rusted bumper, assessing the situation with the tactical mind that his Marine Corps training had drilled into him years ago. The horde wasn't moving with any real strategy, just that relentless forward shuffle that the undead seemed hardwired to do. They were drawn by some combination of movement, heat, and probably the sheer stubborn refusal of the living to lie down and die. The things that used to be people wore the faces of Miller's Crossing like a twisted yearbook. There was Old Man Patterson from the gas station, his mechanic's uniform still stained with oil, though now there was a lot more blood mixed in. Sarah from the coffee shop stumbled along with half her face missing, revealing teeth that had once smiled at customers while taking their orders. Deputy Martinez still wore his badge, which would have been funny if it wasn't so damn tragic. Marcus had gone to high school with Martinez. They'd played football together, got drunk together after graduation, talked about their dreams of getting out of this nowhere town. Now Martinez was just another walking corpse with dead eyes and an appetite for living flesh. "We need to thin them out before they reach the barricades," Marcus said into the radio. "Tommy, you got eyes on any stragglers we can pick off without drawing the whole crowd?" Tommy Mitchell's southern drawl came through, calm as ever despite the apocalypse happening around them. "Yeah, I got a few on the edges. Y'all want me to start dropping them?" Marcus thought for a second. Every shot would bring more of them eventually, but if they let this horde reach their defenses intact, they'd be overwhelmed in minutes. "Do it. Aim for the ones on the south side. Jack, soon as Tommy starts shooting, you and I put down anything that breaks off from the main group and heads our way. We create a corridor, funnel them toward the traps we set up on Elm Street." Jackson's reply was quick. "Roger that. This is gonna get loud real fast." The first shot rang out, a sharp crack that echoed off the empty storefronts and abandoned cars littering the street. One of the zombies dropped, the top of its skull exploding in a spray of black ichor. The others barely reacted, their decayed brains too far gone to process fear or self-preservation. They just kept coming, though a few on the edge of the group started angling toward the sound. Marcus sighted down his rifle, breathing steady, and squeezed the trigger. The recoil was familiar, comforting even. His target, a woman in a torn business suit, jerked as the round punched through her forehead and dropped her like a puppet with cut strings. The only way to stop them for good was to destroy the brain. Anything else just slowed them down, and sometimes not even that. He'd seen zombies with their guts hanging out still crawling toward victims, seen them with broken legs dragging themselves forward with their arms, relentless as the tide. Jackson opened up from his position, the rapid fire from his semi-automatic creating a staccato rhythm that blended with Tommy's more measured shots from the rooftop. Bodies started dropping, but for every one they put down, it seemed like two more appeared from the side streets and alleyways. The town was lousy with them, like kicking over a rotten log and watching the insects pour out. "We got movement coming from the east." Tommy's voice had lost some of its calm. "Big group, maybe 50 or 60, hauling ass toward the noise. Y'all need to wrap this up and fall back." Marcus swore under his breath. The problem with trying to fight a horde was that they didn't get scared, didn't retreat, didn't do anything except keep coming until something stopped them. And noise drew them like moths to a flame. Every shot they fired was a dinner bell ringing across the ruins of Miller's Crossing. "All right, controlled retreat." Marcus barked into the radio. "Tommy, get down from that roof and get to the community center. Jack, lay down cover fire and then move. I'll bring up the rear." He fired 3 more shots in quick succession, dropping zombies with the efficiency of someone who'd had way too much practice over the past 72 hours. Jackson sprinted from the hardware store, his pack bouncing on his back as he ran in a low crouch. He was a big guy, used to work construction before the world ended, and he moved with surprising speed for his size. Marcus provided covering fire, picking off 2 zombies that lurched into Jackson's path. The undead reached for him with rotting fingers, but Jackson was already past them, his boots pounding the pavement as he made for the community center 3 blocks down. Tommy came sliding down from the diner's roof using a drainage pipe, landing hard but rolling with the impact. The kid was only 19, had been working in his dad's auto shop and taking classes at the community college before everything went sideways. Now he was one of their best shots and had proven himself to be gutsy as hell when it counted. Marcus waited until both of them had a good lead, then broke from cover himself. The moment he moved, a collective moan rose from the horde, and dozens of dead eyes fixed on his running form. They surged forward with that uncanny burst of speed that zombies sometimes showed when prey was close. His legs pumped, adrenaline turning the world into sharp focus. Every detail stood out, the abandoned teddy bear lying in the street, the smell of decay and smoke hanging in the air, the sound of dragging footsteps and hungry moans behind him. A zombie lurched out from between 2 cars, and Marcus didn't break stride. He smashed the rifle but into its face, feeling bone crunch, and kept running. The thing fell backward but would be up again in seconds. You couldn't stop running, couldn't hesitate. The moment you slowed down out here, you were done. The community center appeared ahead, a squat brick building that had hosted everything from town meetings to Little League sign-ups. Now it was fortress and sanctuary, windows boarded up and reinforced, doors barricaded with whatever materials they could scavenge. Brianna Taylor stood at the entrance, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, a baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire held ready in her hands. "Come on, move it," she shouted, waving them forward. Kyle Harrison was beside her, the high school chemistry teacher who'd turned out to be pretty damn useful when it came to making improvised explosives and other creative ways to put down the undead. Marcus hit the steps at full speed, Tommy and Jackson already through the door. He spun as he crossed the threshold, raising his rifle for one last shot. The lead zombie was maybe 10 feet away, close enough that he could see the maggots writhing in its eye sockets. He fired, the round taking it in the center of the forehead, and then Brianna was slamming the reinforced door shut. Kyle threw the bolt locks, and they all heard the heavy thud of bodies hitting the other side moments later. The door shuttered but held. They'd reinforced it with steel plates scavenged from the high school shop class, and so far, it had proven zombie-proof. "That was too close," Brianna said, breathing hard. She was a paramedic, or had been before there was anyone left to save. Now she was their medic, fighter, and one of the toughest people Marcus had ever met. The apocalypse had a way of showing you who people really were, and Brianna was solid steel under pressure. Marcus nodded, checking his ammunition situation. 8 rounds left now. We can't keep doing this. Every time we engage them, we use ammo we can't replace and draw more of them into town. We need a new strategy. The community center's main hall had been converted into their operations base. Sleeping bags were scattered around, supplies stacked against the walls, and a large map of Miller's Crossing was spread across a folding table in the center. 17 other survivors were huddled in various corners of the room, ranging from old Mrs. Henderson who'd taught English at the elementary school for 40 years, to the Martinez twins, Elena and Carlos, who were all of 8 years old and trying to be brave while their world fell apart. Tommy dropped his rifle on the table and grabbed a bottle of water, draining half of it in one go. So what's the play, boss? We can't stay here forever. Food's running low, and sooner or later those things are gonna figure out how to get in, or enough of them will pile up that the doors won't matter. Marcus studied the map, his mind racing through options. They'd talked about trying to make it out of town, but the roads were clogged with abandoned vehicles and wandering dead. They'd sent out a scouting party 2 days ago. Only one person came back, and she'd been bitten. They'd had to put her down before she turned. It was getting harder to see a way out of this that didn't end with all of them dead or worse. There's the old Cold War bunker, Kyle said, pushing his glasses up his nose. The one out by the Jameson farm, about 5 miles north of town. It was built back in the 60s, supposed to withstand a nuclear blast. If we could make it there, we'd have real shelter, and I know for a fact that old man Jameson kept it stocked with supplies. He was one of those doomsday prepper types. Jackson perked up at that. Wait, seriously? Why didn't you mention this before? Kyle shrugged. Didn't think about it until now. Been kind of busy trying not to get eaten. But yeah, it's there. Question is whether we can make it 5 miles through zombie-infested territory with kids and elderly folks in tow. Brianna moved to the map, tracing a route with her finger. If we go through the industrial park and then cut across the fields, we might be able to avoid the main concentrations. Most of the zombies are clustered in the residential areas and downtown. The farms are pretty sparse. Marcus considered it. It was risky as hell, but staying here was just a slow death. They were running out of everything: food, water, ammunition, hope. At least the bunker represented a chance, however slim. We'd need to move fast and quiet, he said, thinking out loud. Traveling light, only essential supplies. We'd have to scout the route first, make sure we're not walking into a death trap. Tommy leaned back against the wall. I'll go. Done plenty of hunting in those woods, know the area pretty well. Take maybe one other person, do a quick recon, and report back. Marcus met his eyes. The kid was volunteering for what could easily be a one-way trip, and they both knew it. But that was the world now. Every decision carried the weight of life and death, and sometimes you just had to roll the dice. All right. Take Jackson with you. You're both fast and know how to handle yourselves. Stay off the roads, avoid any groups larger than 3 or 4, and for God's sake, don't be heroes. If it looks bad, you turn around and come straight back. We can't afford to lose anyone else. Jackson nodded, already checking his gear. When do we leave? Marcus glanced at the boarded windows. Outside, the moans of the dead provided a constant backdrop, like some nightmare soundtrack that never ended. First light. Zombies are sluggish in the morning, especially after cold nights. Gives you the best chance of getting past them. The rest of the day was spent in tense preparation. They rationed out what little food they had, mostly canned goods and stale crackers. Mrs. Henderson did her best to keep the kids occupied with quiet games and stories, though it was hard to distract children from the reality of monsters outside the door. Brianna checked everyone's health, treating minor cuts and infections with their dwindling medical supplies. Every aspirin, every bandage was precious now. You couldn't just run to the pharmacy anymore. Well, you could, but the pharmacies were full of zombies like everywhere else. Marcus found himself unable to sleep when night fell, so he took first watch. The community center had a second-floor window that gave a decent view of Main Street, and he sat there with his rifle across his lap, watching the shadows move below. The undead were more active at night, or maybe it just seemed that way. They wandered in random patterns, bumping into each other, sometimes standing still for long minutes before lurching into motion again. It was like watching broken machines, stuck in an endless loop of seeking and hunger. "Can't sleep either?" Brianna's voice came from behind him, soft in the darkness. She settled down next to him, her own weapon, a modified crowbar with sharpened edges, resting against the wall. Marcus shook his head. "Too wired. Keep thinking about all the ways this can go wrong." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "You know, before all this, I thought I had my life figured out. Job I loved, apartment in the city, boyfriend I was probably gonna marry. Then the world ends, and turns out none of that mattered. Everything just, gone in a week." Marcus understood that feeling. He'd done 2 tours overseas, come back to Miller's Crossing to help his mom run her store, figured he'd live a quiet life. The universe apparently had other plans. "Yeah, well, the world might have ended, but we're still here. Long as we're breathing, we got a chance to make it through this." Brianna smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "When'd you become such an optimist?" He snorted. "Desperate times and all that. Someone's gotta believe we'll see the other side of this nightmare." They sat in companionable silence, 2 souls keeping watch against the dark. Below, the zombies continued their aimless wandering, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked frantically before being cut off with a yelp. The sound made Marcus's jaw tighten, but there was nothing to be done. You couldn't save everyone. Hell, most days he wasn't sure they could save anyone. When dawn finally broke, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed obscene given the death surrounding them, Tommy and Jackson prepared to head out. They traveled light, basic supplies, weapons, water, and a radio. The plan was to check in every 2 hours if possible, though they all knew that radio silence didn't necessarily mean the worst. The dead played hell with signals sometimes, and there were plenty of dead zones around Miller's Crossing even before they were filled with actual dead things. "Y'all be careful out there," Brianna said, giving Jackson a quick hug. The big man patted her shoulder awkwardly. "Always am. We'll be back before you know it, probably with stories about how we didn't see a single zombie and this whole trip was a cakewalk." Tommy checked his rifle one last time. "Yeah, and maybe we'll find a working pizza place while we're out there. Could murder a pepperoni right about now." The attempt at humor was appreciated even if nobody really laughed. Gallows humor had become their default, a way to deal with the constant stress and fear. You either laughed or you broke down crying, and crying didn't do much to keep you alive. Marcus opened the back door, the one that faced the alley rather than the street. They'd keep the front barricaded while the scouts slipped out the rear. 2 hours, check in. Anything happens, you get on that radio and call for help, even if we can't reach you. Someone might hear. Tommy gave him a casual salute. "Yes, sir, Sergeant Webb, sir." Then they were gone, moving low and fast through the alley, disappearing around the corner. Marcus shut the door and locked it tight, feeling the weight of command settle on his shoulders like a physical thing. Brianna touched his arm. "They'll be fine. Those 2 have more luck than sense." He wanted to believe that, but luck had a way of running out, especially in a world where death literally walked the streets. The morning crawled by with agonizing slowness. Every minute felt like an hour as they waited for the first radio check. Marcus tried to keep himself busy, inventorying their supplies and reinforcing weak points in their defenses, but his mind kept drifting to Tommy and Jackson out there in the ruins. When the radio finally crackled to life at the 2-hour mark, he nearly jumped. "Home base, this is Recon Team. Y'all reading me? Tommy's voice was hushed but clear. Marcus grabbed the radio. Read you loud and clear. What's your status? Static for a moment, then, made it to the industrial park. Lots of abandoned trucks and equipment, but not many zombies. Saw a group of maybe 10 near the old textile mill, but we gave them a wide berth. Moving toward the fields now. So far so good. Relief washed through Marcus. Copy that. Stay sharp and check in again in 2 hours. The line went dead, and he set the radio down. Around the room, the other survivors were watching him with expressions that ranged from hopeful to terrified. These were people who'd been teachers, shop owners, mechanics, parents. Normal folks who'd been thrown into a nightmare and were doing their best to survive. He owed it to them to get this right, to find a way out of this trap they were in. Kyle approached, carrying a notebook filled with his cramped handwriting. I've been thinking about the bunker. If it's as stocked as I remember, we're talking about months of supplies, maybe longer. But we'll need to be smart about the move. One trip, everyone together. We can't afford to split the group or make multiple runs. Marcus nodded. Agreed. We'll need to rig up some kind of transportation for Mrs. Henderson and the kids. Maybe find a vehicle that still runs, load everyone in. Jackson's wife, Nicole, spoke up from where she sat with the Martinez twins. She was a thin woman with haunted eyes, a former accountant who'd lost her whole family in the first days of the outbreak. What about noise? Engines are gonna draw every zombie for miles. It was a valid concern. They'd all seen how the undead reacted to loud sounds, swarming toward it like sharks to blood in the water. We'll have to risk it, Marcus said. On foot, with the pace we'd have to keep for the kids and elderly, we'd be sitting ducks. At least in a vehicle, we can outrun them if things go south. We just need to find one that's reliable and big enough to fit everyone. Brianna pulled out a set of keys from her pocket. The church van. It seats 15, and Pastor Williams kept that thing running like a dream. He was always meticulous about maintenance. Marcus remembered the pastor, a good man who'd been trying to help people evacuate when a zombie tore his throat out. The memory was sharp and painful, like most memories these days. Where is it? She pointed to the map. Parking lot behind the church, 3 blocks west. Might still be there if nobody's taken it. It was worth checking out. If they could secure a running vehicle, their chances of making it to the bunker went from slim to possible, which was about as good as odds got in the apocalypse. We'll send a team tonight after dark to check it out. Small group, in and out quick. The second check-in came right on schedule. Tommy reported they'd reached the edge of the fields and were making good time. The farmland was relatively clear, just a few scattered zombies that were easy to avoid. They estimated another hour to reach the Jameson property and the bunker. Be advised, Tommy added, we found signs of other survivors out here. Campfire that's maybe a day old, some trash. Somebody's moving through the area. That was interesting. They hadn't seen any other survivors in over a week, not since the military convoy that had passed through and refused to stop, just kept rolling with a megaphone telling everyone to head for designated safe zones that probably didn't exist. The idea that there were others out there, people who might be friendly or might be desperate enough to be dangerous, added another variable to an already complicated situation. Keep your eyes open, Marcus transmitted back. Don't engage unless you have to. We don't know if they're friendly. The afternoon dragged on, tension ratcheting higher with each passing minute. When the 3-hour mark came and went without a radio call, Marcus felt his gut tighten. Could be nothing. Could be they were in a dead zone. Could be they were running silent to avoid detection. Or could be something had gone very, very wrong. At hour 4 with still no contact, Brianna voiced what everyone was thinking. We need to go after them. Marcus was already gearing up. Kyle, you're in charge while I'm gone. Nobody opens these doors unless they hear my voice and I give you the password. Anything happens, you lock this place down tight and wait. Kyle's face was pale, but he nodded. What's the password? Marcus thought for a second. Touchdown. Nobody else would know that except us. He turned to Brianna. You're with me. We move fast, follow their route, and hope we find them before. He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. They armed themselves with the best weapons they had left, Marcus with his rifle and a machete, Brianna with her crowbar and a 9mm pistol they'd scavenged from the sheriff's office. Every bullet counted, so they'd have to make their shots perfect. The back door opened onto an alley that reeked of garbage and decay. 3 zombies were visible at the far end, but they were facing away, drawn by something out of sight. Marcus and Brianna moved in the opposite direction, staying low, using the cover of dumpsters and abandoned cars. The key to moving through zombie territory was to stay quiet, stay aware, and never, ever run unless you absolutely had to. Running drew attention, and attention got you killed. They made it 2 blocks before encountering their first real obstacle. A group of maybe 15 zombies clogged the intersection ahead, milling around the wreckage of a car accident. The bodies were fresher than most, which meant this had happened recently, and that meant the zombies were faster, more aggressive. The newly turned were always the most dangerous. Marcus signaled for Brianna to follow him down a side street, but movement caught his eye. A zombie lurched out from a doorway, its jaw hanging loose, one arm missing below the elbow. It was maybe 5 feet away and reaching for Brianna with its remaining hand. She spun, the crowbar whistling through the air, and caught the thing across the temple. The spike on the end punched through bone, and the zombie dropped like a stone. But the noise had drawn attention. Moans rose from the intersection, and dead eyes turned their way. Run, Marcus hissed, and they bolted. Behind them, the sound of dragging feet and hungry moans grew louder as the pack gave chase. They cut through a yard, vaulted a fence, and emerged onto a street that ran parallel to their intended route. A quick glance back showed the zombies struggling with the fence, buying them precious seconds. They didn't slow down until they reached the industrial park, both of them breathing hard. The area was a maze of warehouses and loading docks, rusted machinery and abandoned trucks creating a landscape that looked post-nuclear. Which way? Brianna gasped, scanning for threats. Marcus pulled out the map, orienting himself. Tommy said they went past the textile mill. That's east, should be able to see it from here. They spotted the mill's smokestacks rising above the other buildings and headed that way, moving carefully. The industrial park was too quiet, which set Marcus's nerves on edge. Quiet meant either no zombies or so many that everything else had been killed or driven off. They found the first body near the loading dock of a furniture warehouse. Not a zombie, but a fresh corpse, a man who'd been shot through the head recently enough that the blood was still tacky. Marcus knelt beside it, examining the wound. This wasn't a zombie kill. Bullet hole, close range, execution style. Brianna's grip on her crowbar tightened. Tommy and Jackson? He shook his head. Don't think so. This guy's been dead at least a few hours, and he's not one of ours. Never seen him before. The sound of voices ahead made them both freeze. Marcus strained to listen, picking out at least 3 different people, maybe more. They were arguing about something, the words indistinct but the tone aggressive. He motioned for Brianna to follow, and they crept closer, using a row of shipping containers for cover. Peering around the edge, Marcus saw a scene that made his blood run cold. Tommy and Jackson were on their knees in the middle of a clear area, hands zip-tied behind their backs. 5 armed men surrounded them, all wearing mismatched tactical gear and carrying rifles. This wasn't a random encounter. This was organized, and that made it infinitely more dangerous than zombies. The dead were predictable. Desperate humans were anything but. One of the men, a tall guy with a shaved head and a scar running down his cheek, was doing most of the talking. I'm gonna ask you one more time, and if I don't like the answer, I'm gonna shoot your friend here in the kneecap and let him scream until every zombie in a mile radius shows up. Where's your camp, and how many people you got? Tommy's face was bloody, but his expression was defiant. Go to hell. Scarface backhanded him, the sound of the impact making Brianna flinch beside Marcus. Wrong answer. See, me and my boys, we got a good thing going. We find survivors, we take what they got, and we move on. It's simple economics in the apocalypse. You either got something we want, or you're zombie food. So make this easy on yourself and tell me where your people are holed up. Jackson spoke for the first time, his voice steady despite the circumstances. You're wasting your time. It's just us. Everyone else is dead. One of the other men laughed. He's lying. Look at their gear. This is quality stuff, well maintained. They got a base somewhere, probably with supplies. Maybe women and kids too. The way he said it made Marcus's trigger finger itch. These weren't just looters. They were predators, and they'd found his people. He couldn't let them leave here alive with that information, but 5 against 2 were bad odds, even with the element of surprise. He turned to Brianna, keeping his voice barely above a whisper. I'm gonna try to get an angle on the 3 to the left. On my signal, you put a round into Scarface. That'll create chaos. Tommy and Jackson will react. We might get lucky. She nodded, her face set in grim determination. They separated, Marcus moving around the containers to get a better position while Brianna sighted down her pistol. The discussion below was getting more heated. Scarface had pulled out a knife and was waving it in front of Tommy's face. Maybe I start by cutting off fingers. See how tough you are when you're looking at your own bones. That's when Jackson made his move. Despite his hands being tied, he lunged forward, driving his shoulder into the legs of the nearest raider. The man went down hard, his rifle clattering away. In the same instant, Brianna fired. The shot took Scarface in the shoulder, spinning him around. Marcus opened up, his rifle barking 3 times in rapid succession. 2 of the raiders dropped, dead before they hit the ground. The third took a round in the chest but managed to return fire, bullets spanging off the metal container next to Marcus's head. Chaos erupted. Tommy rolled to his feet despite his bound hands and kicked another raider in the groin, doubling him over. Jackson had gotten hold of the dropped rifle and, in an impressive display of dexterity, managed to fire it one-handed while still zip-tied. The shot went wide, but it forced the remaining raiders to take cover. Marcus took down the wounded raider with a headshot, then shifted his aim to Scarface, who was scrambling for cover behind a van. The last raider standing decided discretion was the better part of valor and bolted, running full sprint toward the far side of the industrial park. Marcus let him go, couldn't risk the ammunition, and they had bigger problems. The gunfire was already drawing attention. From various corners of the industrial park, zombies began emerging, attracted by the noise like dinner bells had been rung. We gotta move, now! Marcus shouted, sprinting to where Tommy and Jackson were struggling to their feet. He pulled out his knife and cut their zip ties, freeing them. Tommy grabbed a rifle from one of the dead raiders. Thanks for the rescue, man. Things were getting a bit tense. Jackson was already moving toward the exit. We can have a reunion later. Right now, we got company. He wasn't kidding. Zombies were converging from multiple directions, at least 30 that Marcus could see, probably more out of sight. The gunfight had been like setting off a flare in the dark. Every undead thing in range was heading their way. The fields, run for the fields. Tommy yelled, and they all took off. Brianna was fast, her paramedic training keeping her in good shape, but Marcus could hear her breathing getting ragged as they sprinted through the industrial park. Behind them, the moans grew louder, closer. A zombie lurched out from between 2 buildings, and Marcus clotheslined it without breaking stride, feeling the impact jar his arm. They burst out of the industrial park and into open farmland, tall grass whipping at their legs as they ran. In the distance, Marcus could see a structure rising from the earth, half buried and covered in overgrowth. The bunker. There. Kyle had been right about its location. The question was whether they could reach it before the horde caught up. Tommy, despite having been beaten and tied up, was in the lead, his longer legs eating up the ground. Jackson was flagging, his size working against him in a distance run, and Brianna grabbed his arm, helping to pull him along. Marcus brought up the rear, risking a glance back. The zombies were maybe 50 yards behind, a shambling wave of death that stretched across the field. More were joining from the sides, drawn by the movement and noise. They were going to be surrounded if they didn't reach shelter in the next minute. The bunker's entrance was a concrete structure with a heavy steel door, covered in rust and vines. Tommy hit it first, grabbing the handle and pulling. It didn't budge. "It's locked," he shouted, panic edging into his voice for the first time. Kyle skidded to a stop beside him, examining the mechanism. "It's a combination lock, old military style. We need the code." Marcus's mind raced. They'd come all this way, and they were going to die because of a damn lock. The zombies were 30 yards away now, close enough that he could hear the wet rasp of their breathing, smell the decay. Jackson pushed past them, staring at the lock with intensity. "My granddad worked on these bunkers back in the day. He told me stories. Try 1-9-6-3, the year they were commissioned." Tommy spun the dial with shaking hands. "That's a hell of a guess to bet our lives on." He pulled the handle. Nothing. "Doesn't work." Brianna had drawn her pistol and was taking careful shots at the approaching horde. Each bullet dropped a zombie, but there were too many. "Whatever you're gonna do, do it fast." Jackson's face was screwed up in concentration. Wait. He said they changed the codes during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Try 1-9-6-2. 20 yards. Marcus could see individual faces now, people he'd known, people he'd never met, all wearing the same expression of mindless hunger. Tommy's hands were steady this time as he dialed in the new combination. He pulled the handle, and with a groan of protesting metal that hadn't moved in decades, the door swung open. "Go, go, go!" They piled through the entrance, Marcus firing his last few rounds into the press of zombies to buy them seconds. Then they were inside, throwing their weight against the door. It closed with a hollow boom, and Jackson slammed home the locking bar just as something heavy thudded against the other side. The zombies had reached them, but the door was solid steel, 3 inches thick. They were safe, at least for the moment. For several seconds, nobody spoke, just stood in the darkness catching their breath. The air was stale and smelled of old concrete, but it was the sweetest thing Marcus had ever breathed. Tommy found a flashlight on his belt and clicked it on, the beam cutting through the gloom. They were in a corridor that sloped downward, leading into the earth. The walls were concrete, stained with age but solid. Overhead, battery-powered emergency lights flickered to life, apparently triggered by the door opening. "Well," Jackson said, breaking the silence, "we found it." Brianna started laughing, a slightly hysterical edge to it. "We found it, nearly died about 6 different ways, but yeah, we found it." Marcus allowed himself a small smile. They weren't out of danger, not by a long shot. The others were still back at the community center, waiting for word. But this was a chance, maybe the first real one they'd had since the world ended. "Let's see what we got down here," he said, starting down the corridor. The bunker opened up into a series of rooms, sleeping quarters with rusty bunk beds, a command center with outdated equipment, and most importantly, a storage area. Kyle's information had been solid. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with canned goods, water purification tablets, medical supplies, even weapons and ammunition. It was a treasure trove, enough to keep their whole group alive for months, maybe years if they were careful. "This is it," Tommy said, awe in his voice. "This is how we survive." Marcus nodded, but his mind was already moving to the next problem. "We need to get the others here. Can't use the radio underground, so one of us has to go back topside and make contact." Jackson held up a hand. "I'll do it. You guys have done enough. Besides, I'm the one who figured out the door code. Least I can do is make myself useful." Before anyone could argue, he headed back up the corridor. They heard the door open, the chorus of moans from outside, then the door slamming shut again. Moments later, his voice came through on the radio. Home base, this is Jackson. Come in. Marcus grabbed his radio. We're here, Jackson. What's your status? The relief in Kyle's voice was palpable. Thank God. We've been trying to reach you for hours. What happened? Marcus gave him the quick version: the raiders, the fight, the bunker. It's real, and it's stocked. We need to organize an evacuation, get everyone here tonight if possible. The longer we wait, the more chances for something to go wrong. Kyle rogered that and signed off to start preparations. Jackson came back down, shaking his head. There's gotta be 200 of those things up there now, just milling around. They'll wander off eventually, but it's gonna be a problem when we try to bring people in. Brianna was examining the supplies, her paramedic instincts taking inventory. We've got antibiotics, bandages, even some surgical supplies down here. This is better than most hospitals right now. Tommy found the armory, letting out a low whistle. Rifles, pistols, grenades, even a couple of shotguns. Old man Jameson really did prep for the end of the world. Marcus joined him, looking at the weapons. They were old, Cold War era, but well-maintained and wrapped in protective covers. With this kind of firepower, they could actually defend themselves properly, maybe even clear out the zombies in the area. We'll need to be smart about this, he said. The bunker's great, but if we're trapped underground with no way out, it's just a fancy tomb. We clear the immediate area, establish a perimeter, make this place truly secure. Over the next few hours, they planned. Jackson kept radio contact with Kyle, coordinating the evacuation. The plan was to wait until just before dawn when the zombies were most sluggish, load everyone into the church van that a team had successfully secured during the night, and make a run for the bunker. It was risky, but every option was risky now. Nightfall came, and with it, a tense waiting period. Marcus tried to sleep but couldn't. His mind kept running through scenarios, calculating odds, trying to anticipate what could go wrong. At 0300 hours, the radio crackled. This is home base. We're loading up now. Should be at your location in approximately 20 minutes. Marcus felt his heart rate kick up. This was it. Copy that. We'll be ready to receive you. Come in hot and don't stop for anything. We'll cover your approach. He gathered the others, and they geared up with weapons from the armory. The plan was to open the bunker door when they heard the van approaching, provide covering fire if needed, and get everyone inside as fast as possible. Tommy checked his rifle, a surplus M16 that had probably been sitting in the armory since the 70s but still worked like new. Just like old times, huh? Except instead of paper targets, we're shooting our former neighbors. Marcus didn't have a good response to that. The horror of what they'd become, what they were forced to do, was something none of them talked about much. You couldn't dwell on it and stay functional. You just did what you had to do and tried not to think about the faces behind the rot. The sound of an engine reached them, muffled by the door but unmistakable. Marcus threw the lock and hauled the door open. The field outside was bathed in pre-dawn gray, and the church van was barreling across it, zombies scattering in its wake. Some of the undead were getting hit, bouncing off the front bumper or disappearing under the wheels. Kyle was driving, his face set in concentration, and the van was packed with their people. Cover them! Marcus shouted, and they opened fire. The rifles barked in the early morning air, dropping zombies that were getting too close to the van's path. Tommy was particularly effective, his marksmanship putting down threats with precision. The van slewed to a stop maybe 20 feet from the bunker entrance, and the side door flew open. People started pouring out, Mrs. Henderson clutching her purse like it was a lifeline, the Martinez twins being carried by Nicole, Kyle emerging from the driver's seat with a wild look in his eyes. Move, move, move. Brianna was at the bunker entrance, ushering people inside. Marcus and the others formed a perimeter, firing at any zombie that got within 30 feet. The undead were converging again, drawn by the noise and commotion, but they were still scattered enough that the survivors had a chance. The last person out of the van was Elena Martinez, the 8-year-old stumbling as she ran. A zombie, faster than the others, lurched toward her with grasping hands. Marcus swung his rifle around, but the angle was bad, he might hit the girl. Then Kyle was there, tackling the zombie from the side, both of them going down in a tangle of limbs. The zombie's teeth snapped inches from his face, and Kyle screamed, not in pain but in fury, as he jammed a screwdriver up through its jaw and into its brain. The thing went limp, and Kyle shoved it off, scrambling to his feet. I'm good," he yelled, checking himself frantically for bites. Nothing. Pure luck. Elena ran past him into the bunker, and Kyle was right behind her. Marcus fired 3 more shots, clearing the immediate area, then back toward the entrance. Everyone inside? Brianna did a quick head count. All present and accounted for. They retreated into the bunker, and Jackson slammed the door shut, locking it tight. Outside, the zombies threw themselves against the barrier, but it held firm. Inside, there was chaos as 20-plus people tried to catch their breath and process what had just happened. Marcus did his own head count, checking faces. Everyone from the community center had made it. Against all odds, they'd pulled off the evacuation without losing a single person. Mrs. Henderson was crying softly, whether from relief or terror, Marcus couldn't tell. The Martinez twins clung to Nicole, who was whispering soothing words to them. Kyle sat against the wall, his hands shaking from the adrenaline crash. That was insane, he muttered. That was completely insane. Marcus couldn't disagree, but they'd made it. They had shelter, supplies, and most importantly, they had each other. The group that had survived Miller's Crossing was intact, battered and traumatized, but alive. All right, listen up, he called out, and the room quieted. I know everyone's exhausted and scared, but we made it. This bunker is our new home, at least for now. It's got food, water, medical supplies, and defenses. We're gonna rest, we're gonna regroup, and we're gonna figure out our next move. But tonight, we survived. That's something. Tommy raised a canteen and a mock toast. To surviving another day in the apocalypse. May we have the good sense to keep doing it. A few people managed weak smiles. It wasn't much, but it was something. Hope, fragile and tentative, but real. As the group settled in, finding bunks and organizing supplies, Marcus pulled Brianna aside. What do you think our chances are, really? She considered the question seriously. A week ago, I would have said 0. Now? Maybe 50-50. We've got resources, a defendable position, and a group of people who've proven they can handle themselves. The question is what happens next. Do we stay here indefinitely? Do we try to find other survivors? Do we look for some kind of cure or solution? Marcus didn't have answers, but for the first time since the world ended, he felt like they had options. The bunker was a fortress, a place to catch their breath and plan. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. Outside, the sun rose on another day in a world overrun by the undead. The zombies that had chased them gradually dispersed, wandering back to wherever the dead went when they weren't hunting. The field returned to an eerie calm, broken only by the wind rustling through the grass. Underground, the survivors of Miller's Crossing began the process of turning a Cold War relic into a home. They organized supplies, set up sleeping areas, and established a watch rotation to monitor the bunker entrance. Kyle discovered that some of the old equipment in the command center was still functional, including a shortwave radio that might let them communicate with other survivor groups if any existed. Over the following days, they fell into a routine. Tommy and Jackson led teams to carefully venture outside during daylight hours, scavenging from nearby abandoned farms and setting up early warning systems for zombie herds. Brianna established a medical bay in one of the side rooms, treating the various injuries and illnesses that plagued the group. Mrs. Henderson, proving herself to be far tougher than her gentle demeanor suggested, took charge of rationing food and organizing the children's education, determined that the apocalypse wouldn't rob them of their future. Marcus coordinated it all, feeling the weight of leadership but also the support of people who trusted him to get them through this. They held regular meetings where everyone had a voice, making decisions collectively about everything from water usage to when to risk supply runs. One evening, about a week after they'd secured the bunker, Marcus stood at the entrance, looking out through the small observation window. The field was peaceful, almost beautiful in the fading light. A few zombies wandered in the distance, but nothing like the hordes that had chased them. Thinking about what's next, Brianna joined him, as she often did during the quiet moments. He nodded. Yeah. We can't stay underground forever. Sooner or later, we'll need to expand, maybe reclaim Miller's Crossing or find another settlement. Build something permanent. She leaned against the wall, her expression thoughtful. You think that's possible? Actually rebuilding civilization? Marcus considered it. The world had ended, but the world had ended before in various ways throughout history. Plagues, wars, disasters. Humanity had always found a way to crawl back from the brink. I think if we don't try, we're just waiting to die. And I didn't fight this hard to just wait. Tommy's voice crackled over the intercom system they'd rigged up. Hey Marcus, you might want to get down to the command center. Kyle's picking up something on the radio. They hurried down the corridor to where Kyle sat with headphones on, adjusting dials on the old shortwave set. His eyes were wide with excitement. I've got a signal, it's faint but it's definitely human. Someone's broadcasting from what sounds like a government facility, maybe military. They're talking about safe zones, coordinated resistance, even mentions of a possible cure being developed. The room erupted in excited chatter. A cure. Safe zones. The possibility that they weren't alone in this fight. Marcus felt a surge of hope, tempered by caution. They'd been burned by false promises before. Can you get a location? Kyle shook his head. The signal's too weak and it's breaking up. But they keep repeating coordinates. Give me some time, and I might be able to triangulate where it's coming from. Jackson crossed his arms. Even if it's legit, we talking about leaving here? Going cross-country through zombie territory on the hope that somewhere there's people who can help? It was a valid concern, but Marcus found himself drawn to the possibility. The bunker was survival, but it wasn't living. It was hiding and hoping. If there was a chance to actually fight back, to be part of something bigger, didn't they owe it to themselves to try? We don't make any decisions now, he said firmly. Kyle, work on getting more information. In the meantime, we keep doing what we're doing, securing our position, gathering supplies, getting stronger. If and when we have solid intel on these safe zones, we'll put it to a vote. This affects everyone, so everyone gets a say. The group murmured agreement, and they dispersed to their various tasks. Over the next few days, Kyle worked the radio obsessively, slowly piecing together fragments of information. The broadcasts spoke of a facility in Colorado, high in the mountains, where scientists were working on a solution. They claimed to have thousands of survivors under protection and were calling for anyone who could hear to make their way there. It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. But the alternative was to stay in the bunker, living off dwindling supplies, until eventually, something gave out: food, water, hope. Marcus called a meeting, laying out everything they knew. I won't lie to you. Getting to Colorado from here is gonna be dangerous as hell. We're talking maybe 1,000 miles through territory that's crawling with zombies and God knows what else. But staying here is just delaying the inevitable. We need a long-term solution, and maybe, just maybe, this is it. Mrs. Henderson spoke up, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd taught generations of children. I didn't survive this long to die hiding in a hole. If there's a chance to actually beat this thing, to give these children a future, then I say we take it. One by one, the others voiced their agreement. Even those who were afraid, who had every reason to want to stay in the safety of the bunker, recognized that safety without purpose was just a slow death. The vote was unanimous. They would go to Colorado. Preparation became the new focus. They spent weeks planning the route, gathering supplies, and fortifying vehicles. The church van was modified with armor plating scavenged from farm equipment. They stripped down every luxury to make room for fuel, food, and ammunition. Tommy and Jackson led scouting missions, mapping out the safest routes and identifying potential danger zones. They discovered that the zombie hordes tended to cluster around population centers, meaning rural routes would be their best bet. Brianna drilled everyone in basic first aid and combat techniques. Even Mrs. Henderson learned how to properly swing a crowbar to crack a zombie skull. The children were taught how to stay quiet, how to move quickly, and how to recognize danger. It was grim education, but necessary. Kyle made a breakthrough with the radio, managing to establish two-way communication with the Colorado facility. The voice on the other end, a woman who identified herself as Dr. Sarah Reeves, confirmed that the safe zone was real and that they were indeed working on a cure. She provided detailed coordinates and promised that anyone who made it would be welcomed. The day of departure arrived with a mixture of excitement and dread. They'd spent 2 months in the bunker, and it had become home. But home was a luxury the apocalypse didn't afford. They loaded into the van and a pickup truck they'd gotten running, every available space packed with supplies. Marcus took one last look at the bunker, then locked the door behind them. Maybe they'd come back someday. Maybe not. The important thing was they were moving forward. The convoy rolled out at dawn, navigating through fields and back roads. The first day was tense but uneventful. They saw zombies in the distance but none close enough to threaten them. At night, they stopped in an abandoned barn, posting guards and trying to get what sleep they could. The second day brought their first real test. A town they had to pass through was packed with undead, hundreds of them wandering the streets. There was no way around it without adding days to their journey. We punched through, Marcus decided. Fast and loud. Don't stop for anything. The drivers revved the engines, and they charged into the town at full speed. Zombies bounced off the reinforced bumpers or were crushed under the wheels. Hands grabbed at the sides of the vehicles, but the armor held. Someone was screaming in the back, maybe in fear, maybe in defiant rage. They burst out the other side of town, leaving a trail of destroyed zombies in their wake. Everyone was shaken but alive, and the vehicles had held up. It was a victory, small but significant. Days blurred together, each one bringing new challenges. They fought off a group of raiders who'd set up an ambush on a highway. They navigated around a massive horde that must have numbered in the thousands, a writhing mass of undead that stretched across the landscape like a living carpet. They lost the pickup truck when its engine finally gave out in the middle of Nebraska, forcing them to abandon supplies and cram even tighter into the van. But they kept moving, kept pushing forward. Along the way, they picked up other survivors, a family of 4 hiding in a farmhouse, a lone trucker who'd been living in his rig, a young woman who'd survived alone for months and had almost forgotten how to speak. The group grew, and with it, their determination. They were more than just survivors now. They were a community, bound by shared struggle and common purpose. When the Rocky Mountains finally appeared on the horizon, someone started crying. They'd made it. Against impossible odds, through hell and horror, they'd actually made it. The facility was everything Dr. Reeves had promised: massive walls, armed guards, and rows of clean buildings that looked like something from before the world ended. As they approached the gates, they opened, and people came out to meet them. Real people, alive and healthy and smiling. Marcus stepped out of the van, his legs unsteady after so long on the road. A woman with kind eyes and a lab coat approached. "I'm Dr. Reeves. Welcome to New Hope. You made it." He shook her hand, feeling emotions he'd kept bottled up for months threatening to overflow. "Yeah. We made it." Behind him, his people emerged from the van, blinking in the sunlight, taking in the sight of a place that represented the future. Children laughed, the sound strange and wonderful after so long surrounded by death. Mrs. Henderson was hugging someone she'd never met, just grateful to be around civilization again. Tommy and Jackson stood side by side, battered and scarred but alive, watching their group integrate into this new community. Brianna found Marcus in the crowd, and they shared a look that said everything words couldn't. They'd survived. They'd fought, bled, and sacrificed, but they'd survived. And maybe, just maybe, they'd help rebuild a world worth living in. The journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more fights, more losses. But for the first time since that Tuesday when the world went to hell, Marcus Webb allowed himself to believe that humanity had a future. And he'd do whatever it took to protect it.